Lily Allen's West End Girl is a stunning and devastating three-act album musical about the dissolution of a marriage through betrayal. On its surface, it chronicles her ex-husband's infidelity, or as she calls it, a story that she calls pseudofiction. Although that qualifier seems to be more legally protective than it is like a true veil of invention. I think what she captures here is really powerful and really true. What she's capturing is not really just about adultery. It's about the slow, painful process of self-erasure that happens when you try to reconcile love with betrayal, especially when the betrayer shows no remorse. The album, in the end, becomes a vivid portrayal of what happens when you contort yourself to make someone else's cruelty make sense. Her album is structured like a one-woman musical, beautifully and brutally composed, and it unfolds across three acts. Act one, I want to call The Crack in the Brownstone, where the illusion of her perfect life and the fantasy of domestic bliss begins to splinter under the weight of infidelity, insecurity, and envy. Act two, the art of disappearing, the descent into self-erasure, where she internalizes his betrayal and turns against herself in efforts to preserve a dying relationship. And act three, the return to self, the awakening and the reclamation of her power, as she finally sees clearly and chooses to walk away, no longer mistaking endurance for love. Musically speaking, West End Girl does bear Lily Allen's signature, the deceptively sweet, authentic English, doll-like voice gliding over melodies that are laced with reggae, ska, and synth-pop undertones. But at its core, it is an album that sparkles just as much as it devastates, a pop confection of a brutalized heart. She reportedly wrote and recorded this album in just 16 days after she finished her stay at a mental health facility. And I think because of that, the album feels urgent, alive, and unflinchingly honest. And it's a portrait of a woman rebuilding herself from the ruins of humiliation and heartbreak. So let's get started with Act One. Act one, The Crack in the Brownstone, opens up with a fantasy of love, success, and the perfect brownstone. But by the end, that dream collapses into a phone call that changes everything. So, essentially, with West End Girl, Lily paints a picture of a New York move, a husband who is an actor and makes more money than her, who hires a famous interior designer, Billy Cotton, where money is no object. And she talks a little bit about how she feels weird about the fact that, or feels a bit awkward about the fact that she basically can't afford this brownstone, but it's already like a symbol of things being off balance. But then everything changes when she gets a phone call that's like, hey, you're going to be in a play. And he's not proud of her. He's actually quite jealous of her. In fact, famously, her actual husband in the non-pseudofiction life sent her bad luck flowers. He said, my ambitious wife, these flowers are bad luck because if you get reviewed well in this play, you will get all kinds of awards and I will be miserable, your loving husband, which is a red flag if I've ever seen one. So, but essentially what he's done is turn his insecurity into a sin against him and a sin that in fact she must be punished for. And so West End Girl ends jarringly with a phone call where you only hear the protagonist narrating, but presumably as it unfolds in the album, he's basically calling her to ask for an open relationship. The next song opens is ruminating, where she's awake at 4 a.m., imagining another woman in his bed and on top of him, and repeating to herself that you're mine, you're mine. And going over in her mind, the fact that he said, if it has to happen, baby, do you want to know? She says, what a fucking line. Essentially, which indicates to her that perhaps he is actually asking for retroactive permission as opposed to actually asking for an open relationship in a way that is actually fair and just. But she starts to self-gaslight herself and explain things away. And then in Sleepwalking, she further goes into this where she says that you make it my fault, and I'm just sleepwalking. She's essentially going through the motions on autopilot, basically because she's been gaslighting herself and dissociating herself from her needs by allowing this to be an open relationship, despite her better instincts against the fact that he likely is doing this because he is cheating. But one of the most striking lines I found in this song, where she says, "You've made me your Madonna. I want to be your whore." Essentially, that she doesn't want to be this object of purity. All she wants is to be desired by him. She says, "If I can't, basically, if she can't be his equal, at least let her at least be his fantasy." That's not empowerment. It's self-degradation in order to fit herself and contort herself into a shape that somebody who has a vacant hole in his heart, can't ever fill. And then the last song of this act is Tennis, where it opens with kids and dinner and small talk, but him somewhat detached, and her looking at Instagram, and him snatching his phone out of her hand, and that tipping her off, causing her to check texts and for her to ask the pressing question, which is, who's Madeline? Who is Madeline? And essentially, the affair is revealed. And so begins Act Two, where which I have called the art of disappearing. Basically, if Act One is the discovery of the affair, Act Two is survival, where her love turns into self-erasure. So the first song is Madeline, where she texts the other woman and turns these screenshots into a song, basically where she's saying, "Tell me the truth, tell me what happened," begging for reality from somebody who is part of her deceit and part of the unraveling of her marriage. And Madeline basically plays with moral basically rot, insofar as on one hand she's repeating the company line that David has given her, and on the other hand she's like, "Oh well, if he's lying to me, I want to know that too, but like, let me know if you ever need anything, like love and light." And it's so funny because the way that she has the song is set up is that Lily's speaking in her British accent, which feels so real and so raw, and Madeline is in this like sort of fake Valley Girl accent, and she signs her verse off with like love and light, which of all things, love and light, after literally destroying her marriage. But okay, cool. I think that the next song is the most tragic of them all, where it's called a Relapse. And famously, Lily Allen has struggled herself with addiction. She got sober in 2018, I believe. And in this song, she repeats the refrain, "I need a drink, I need a Valium," where this basically the knowledge of this affair has forced her into old habits. But I think the most tragic part is where she says, that "Will you bring me back when I'm climbing up the walls?" She's literally asking, in the wise words of Beyonce, her torturer to become her remedy, which is a total abdication of any self power. She basically makes him her oxygen when he's shown her that he doesn't care if she breathes or not, because he's willing to compromise her well-being in the way that he has. And I think that the thing about marriage that people don't understand is that when you marry somebody, you lean on them, right? And it's like two halves leaning on each other, because it's like supposed to be two becoming one. So when one half falters, it's very hard for the other one not to fall. And I think Relapse is really well paired with the next song, which is called Pussycat Palace, minus the cat. Okay. Where she basically finds his secret apartment, which she thought was a dojo, which I had to look up. A dojo is apparently like a place for spiritual worship, but instead she finds a pussycat palace where it's littered with Trojans, and she says, "You're so fucking broken." And letters from women whose hearts he's broken, and also a grotesque bag full of like lube and toys. And it's basically, she starts wondering, like, are you an addict? Are you an addict, and have you traded your addiction to substances for an addiction to physical intimacy? Maybe. And I think that at this point, this is like forcing her to see the truth, and like disgust starts to replace her love. And that goes even further in song 4chan Stan, where she finds even more receipts. She finds evidence of handbags, purchase, trips to Montauk, etc., weekends away. And she says so stunningly, "You love all the power, but you're not even cute," which is like the first flash of rage and first flash of her really seeing that this person is not a good person, because he won't even tell her who this other woman is. He won't give her name, which I think is like the first sign for her of his actual like lack of empathy. But it's not the moment where she fully wakes up, but it's one of the canaries in the coal mine that shows her that this thing is not actually survivable, because he doesn't actually care about her. Almost his apathy has become violence. And I think the next most striking song is Non-Monogamami, where she actually tries to contort herself into the shapes of a person who is in this sort of like non-monogamous relationship, which she has no desire to be in. She basically says in the song outright, "I committed to losing myself because I don't want to lose you." Basically, she's outright naming the bargain that she's been making all along, which is that to stay in this relationship, she has to erase herself. And in doing so, she's forcing herself into a non-monogamous relationship that she doesn't even want, that makes her feel disgusting. And she lists all the things that she gave up for him, that she changed her immigration status, that she moved away from London, all so he can treat her like a stranger. And it's so sad. One of the lines is, "We tried to be open. I look into your eyes. You said your heart is broken. I tell you that you're chosen. You tell me your heart gets frozen." So basically, it's like she's starting to realize his emotional incapacity. And it's one of the clearest articulation of a self-erasure that I've heard in modern pop. And it's incredibly tragic and incredibly powerful. However, if Act 3 is the art of disappearing, then Act 4 is the art of reappearing, or as I want to call it, the return to self. In this act, the fog lifts and she starts to see his shame for what it really is, which is not her fucking problem, essentially, and lets him fall. So in this act, we have the songs Just Enough, where she says, "You kept me in the dark. You tell yourself it's kind." And which is basically cowardice, which he's told himself is kindness, for essentially to keep the self-deceit going. But she also acknowledges the vacancy that his deceit has left in the marriage, which has left her in this like state of self-loathing, wondering if she's old, wondering if she's booking herself a facelift, and wondering when the facelift will drop. And the song is called Just Enough because she says he's given her just enough hope to hold on to nothing. And that's sort of the axis of the entire album, that his half love, or the sort of breadcrumbs that he's giving her to keep her strung along, are actually not love, that they're just a form of manipulation. The next song, Dallas Major, kind of echoes Non-Monogamami in a different way. Whereas Non-Monogamami, she's trying to force herself to contort into the shape of this non-monogamous relationship. In Dallas Major, she's almost like more detached and sardonic and mocking of herself trying to do this non-monogamous relationship, which she definitely doesn't want to do. She says, "My name is Dallas Major, and I'm here for validation." And she's basically making a mockery of the script even as she's performing it. She basically is playing the part. And at the end, she admits that she's terrified of failure. And that's probably why she's doing this. And I think that that is really, it's important to know that Lily Allen's first marriage actually ended in divorce due to her own infidelity. And she's got two daughters, which she speaks about, where she says, "I'm supposed to be teaching them about love," you know? I think she carried this guilt of having like two, or the impending stain of having two failed marriages. And she's starting to realize that her feel of failure is forcing her to contort herself into these shapes where she's totally losing herself. And then the next song is Beg For Me, where she basically repeats the entire first verse, pre-chorus, and chorus, and also like this really cool interpolation of, "If you want me to stay, love endlessly. If you want me to stay, I'll never leave you," at the end of it. So in Beg For Me, she repeats, "You're so indifferent, and that's insane. My friends think that you're deranged." She's almost like realizing that his apathy is awakening her, because the thing is that the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference, actually. And she's asking, why won't you beg for me? Why don't you care enough about me to feel sorry for the harm that you caused me? She's looking for the empathy where there's no empathy to be found. And I think that this is her realization. And this is the moment where she wakes up. And I think she repeats the song in its entirety to herself, because it's almost like when you're trying to convince yourself that you need to end a relationship. So you repeat these songs almost as a mantra. I did it once with like Dua Lipa's IDGAF when I was trying to get out of a toxic relationship myself. And it did help me get out of it. And I think that that's like the whole purpose of this song. And the epilogues of the relationship are the last two songs, which is Let You Win. And Let You Win has a slash between the W and the IN. So essentially, she talks about how she's become invisible, and how she's like been Alice in Wonderland, which is essentially like the deluded world that he's left her in. And she finally refuses to absorb his shame. You know, he's asking her to like not tell the kids and say that it was mutual. But she says, I'm not going to. She literally says, she wants you to lie to the children, say the ending was mutual, but she refuses finally that she will not absorb his shame. And she actually is going to sing because it's the only thing that she has. I felt like in this sense, she was breaking the fourth wall and kind of releasing the thesis statement of why this album actually exists, because it's her reclamation of her voice against a man who has forced her to erase herself in order to maintain the illusion of marriage at great personal cost. And who never cared enough in the first place, because as we learned in the last song, Fruity Loop, he's so fucking broken, you know? Basically in Fruity Loop, she's like detached. It's almost like a clinical analysis. She says that you're just a little boy looking for your mommy, that you've gotten all caught up in all the fame and money. He can't really do attachment. He's scared he's going to be abandoned. And for the first time, she's starting to understand, and from a detached place. It's almost like she's offering him empathy, but empathy does not mean continuing to punish herself, which is a really powerful thing. And she says probably the most important realization of the entire album, which is that it's not me, it's you, which kind of cleanses her of the fugue state and fog that and spell that he had her under because of his own brokenness. In the next verse, she talks about how she's just a little girl looking for her daddy, thinking that she could break the cycle. I thought I could keep you happy. And that confession is such plain language. I was really struck by the plain language of the song, which really, and I think that it's like, that's the thing about clarity, that in full circle insight, that is just completely clear. And that he's doomed to repeat the same pattern forever. He's in his fruity loop, and that doesn't have anything to do with her. And she walks away from it, not triumphant, not even vindictive, but just free of him, and free of the idea that she's going to be the person to help him or save him, which is a really powerful place to be. So, in conclusion, Lily's West End Girl is an absolutely stunning album about the dissolution of marriage and the path from self-betrayal into self-awareness and alignment, and ultimately freedom. It is about female rage, as I've seen written about it, but it's also about reclamation of self-identity and finding love through self-love. The album was a really painful listen. I think anybody who's experienced betrayal and who has even dealt with hardships in marriage can understand some of the pain that she's referring to. And I think people who've gone through love and breakup and loss, you know, can understand the way that we contort ourselves into shapes to fit the ideals of the people people we love and who we want so desperately to love us back. But that real freedom, I think, that Lily teaches us is in realization that their problems are not ours to fix. That really the best way to teach love is to love ourselves. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. This was very, very difficult. I spent like a day or two working on this. And so I really hope you guys enjoyed this review. The album was really, really, really visceral, really beautiful, and just perfectly constructed. I really think that it really is a big contender for Album of the Year for the Grammys this coming year. Yeah, so I highly recommend it, but I would recommend like taking a bath, which is what I'm about to do, while you listen to it, or perhaps directly after. So anyway. And if you made it to the end, thank you very much. I know this was a long one. Sorry. Bye.